1, 2, 1, 2. You guys can hear me? Keep talking awkwardly amongst yourselves.
It'll take just a second.
Mm-hmm.
We're good? Yep. Good evening. This humbles me. Thank you all for being here. This is amazing, and it's just one of those things you never know who's going to show up and who's not. But with our guest speaker, it doesn't surprise me. Dr. Turek and I have been friends for at least 4 or 5 years. Friends, acquaintances, whatever. I have his phone number. He doesn't answer. Anyway, he will be talking on truth, miracles, God, and the Bible. Feel free toward the end. He will answer questions, and we have a little surprise between now and then. So outside of that, thank you again for being here. I hope you enjoy it. My friend, Dr. Frank Turek.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Thundering Herd. Yes, that's John Mays over there. He's the head of Ratio Christi on this campus. We'll tell you about that a little bit later. Let's go back to September 29th, 2006. That's when Petty Officer Michael Monsoor is a United States Navy SEAL operating in Ramadi, Iraq. Monsoor is standing on a roof in Ramadi, and he's standing in front of a doorway to this roof. He has 2 Navy SEAL teammates lying in the sniper-prone position next to him. They've already taken AK-47 fire and a rocket-propelled grenade, but they're not exactly sure where the enemy is. There's a bit of a lull in the fighting. Insurgents have blocked off the streets in Ramadi, and there's someone on the loudspeaker in the town mosque yelling, "Kill the Americans!" As Monsoor and his team are looking for the next attack, an insurgent from an unknown location throws a grenade up on the roof. It hits Monsoor in the chest, and it falls to his feet. Due to the length of the throw, there's no opportunity to pick it up and throw it back. He has only a split second to make a decision. He can leap through the doorway behind him and save himself, but if he does, his 2 teammates lying on the roof will surely die. Monsoor yells, "Grenade!" But instead of jumping backward to save himself, he jumps forward, chest first, onto the grenade. It detonates. 30 minutes later, 25-year-old Michael Monsoor is dead. His 2 teammates lying on the roof receive only minor injuries because Monsoor's body muffled the blast. One of the survivors said at Monsoor's funeral, "Mikey looked death in the face that day and said, 'You will not take my friends. I will go in their stead.'" I've never seen a United States president cry until April of 2008. That's when President George W. Bush invited Monsoor's parents into the East Room of the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor posthumously. The president couldn't even get through the citation without breaking down. Since then, Monsoor's high school in Garden Grove, California, built a new stadium. They named it Michael A. Monsoor Memorial Stadium. The golden trident insignia that the SEALs wear dominates the 50-yard line. January 2019, North Island, California, just outside of San Diego, the United States Navy commissioned the USS Michael Monsoor, the newest guided missile destroyer in the fleet, Zumwalt class. This is Monsoor's mother, Sally, being escorted onto the ship named in honor of her fallen son. Now, why did they do this? Because Michael Monsoor literally sacrificed himself to save his friends. There's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself to save your friend, said Jesus of Nazareth before he went to the cross. Michael Monsor sacrificed himself to save his friends. The question is, would anybody sacrifice himself to save you? And the answer is, someone already has. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. But in today's culture, particularly on a college campus, people don't believe the story's true. They think it's invented. After all, it was written down by religious people. We know religious people tend to embellish things. And it's got miracles in it, like a resurrection. We don't believe in miracles anymore. How can we believe such a story's true? Well, I actually think it's quite easy to show that Christianity's true. You only need to answer 4 questions in the affirmative to show that it's true. In other words, if you investigate these 4 questions, I think you'll realize that the answer to these 4 questions is yes. And if the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then Christianity's true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. Isn't it? Yes. That is actually from our TV show on every Wednesday nights on DirecTV channel 378. It's also on Roku. And look for NRB if you have Roku. It's also streamed on our website live at that time. We're on radio every Saturday mornings, but since you're a college student, I know you don't get up till the crack of noon on Saturday, so you're not going to listen to it at 10 a.m. It's podcasted. It's called the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. You can listen to it anytime you want. What we do is we present evidence for Christianity, and we cross-examine ideas against it based on our website, crossexamine.org. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. And this is going to serve as our outline here tonight. First question, does truth exist? Why is that important? Because you hear people saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative, right? Well, if there's no truth, obviously Christianity can't be true. Of course, if there's no truth, then atheism can't be true either, right? Actually, if there was no truth, why would you be at Marshall University? I mean, why would you come to college if there's no truth? Of course there's truth. We're going to deal with that first. Second question, does God exist? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if there's no God. I hope to show you tonight that there really is a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent creator who created all things and sustains all things to this very moment. We're going to see 3 arguments for this being. These arguments are taught in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, we're going to try and establish point 2 without any reference to the Bible. Third question, are miracles possible? Obviously, Christianity can't be true if miracles are not possible. But I hope to show you tonight that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and even the atheists are admitting the data for this miracle. We'll get to that tonight. And then finally, we're going to deal with the question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if there's no truth, no God, or no miracles. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we're going to see if the documents are reliable enough to let us know if one particular event from the ancient world took place, and that would be the resurrection. Because if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if he didn't rise from the dead, game over, it's false. As Paul said, writing to the church at Corinth, if Jesus hasn't risen from the dead, your faith is in vain. But if he has risen from the dead, that would mean he's God. And if he's God, whatever he teaches is true. Jesus taught the Old Testament was the Word of God, and he promised the New Testament. You say, well, why should we trust Jesus? Look, I just have a personal policy. If somebody rises from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says, right? Now, there's a lot more detail in the book, and we're not going to have time to go into a lot of detail here. But if you want to go further, the book's available on the book table, as well as a 12-part DVD set that's over 7 hours long. There's another book up there called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. I've noticed that when atheists are arguing there is no God, they actually have to steal aspects of reality that would only exist if God existed in order to say he doesn't exist. In other words, they have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. Now, by the way, all the proceeds from the sale of the books and the DVDs will go to feed needy children. Mine. Okay? Just so you know. I got 3 sons, so I need some help. Now, you actually don't have to buy a book to get the overall argument, because if you type the word evidence, no quotes, just the word evidence, to 44222, I'm going to send you the entire PowerPoint presentation in a PDF format. It's longer than the one I can show you tonight. You'll get it all. Just text the word evidence to 44222, and those watching on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram can do the same thing. We'll send it to you, and I'll put that number up at the end as well. Now, what we're going to do is go through this very quickly. Well, we're going to spend some time, but we're going to cover a lot of ground. So let me warn you about something. I'm from New Jersey, okay? I speak at 150 words a minute with gusts to 350, okay? You cannot listen in Southern, all right? So you're going to have to put on your Northeast ears, because we're going to cruise through this very quickly. You guys ready to go? All right, we're going to start right here at point 1. Does truth exist? And whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson, right? Because Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, "Thundering herd. If he said it that way, the movie would have gone nowhere. You can't handle the..." That's not how he said it. Here's how he said it.
"I want the truth. You can't handle the truth."
All right, let's try it again. "I want the truth."
You can't handle the truth.
Now that was thundering, right? Didn't that feel good? That felt a lot better, didn't it? Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, all truth is relative. If you don't get anything else out of what we talk about here tonight, this may be the most important, certainly the most important thinking skill we're going to talk about here in the next 5 minutes. This thinking skill is so important that half of what you need to know to defend the Christian faith, you'll already know if you get this thinking skill down. And even if you're an atheist, you're going to find this helpful. Why? Because this thinking skill will help you identify what is false. And half the battle is just exposing what is false so you can concentrate on what is true. Now, what is this thinking skill? It's easily communicated by showing you an example of using it. If someone were to come up to you and say, "There is no truth," you should ask that person a question. What should the question be? Yeah, if somebody says there is no truth, you're going to say, "Hey, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth?" Because if it's true that there's no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? Can everybody see that this is a self-defeating statement? What's a self-defeating statement? A self-defeating statement doesn't meet its own standard. To say there is no truth is a truth claim. It would be like me saying I can't speak a word in English. What would you say? Hey, you just use English to say it. It would be like saying my parents had no kids that lived. Or my brother is an only child, right? These are self-defeating statements. And once you get good at identifying self-defeating statements, you're going to save yourself a lot of pain and suffering. Why? Because if you start believing things that are false and start orienting your life toward them, eventually it's going to hurt. Now, what's the thinking skill? What you need to do is you need to turn the claim on itself. Turn the claim on itself. So if somebody says there's no truth, you're going to say, does that meet its own standard? You're going to ask, is that true? And see what they say, right? Let's do a few more of these. Suppose someone were to say to you, all truth is relative. You've probably heard people say that. If you turn the claim on itself, what are you going to say back? Yes, Hayden's got it. Is that a relative truth? He's only 14. He's got this. Come on, you 25-year-olds. Let's go, right? Of course. Is that a relative truth? No, that's an absolute truth claim, claiming all truth is relative. Now, sometimes it's said this way. There isn't the truth, only my truth. Now, if someone says this, if you turn the claim on itself, what would you say back to him? You could say, what about my truth? But then that's just a battle of opinions. You could also say this, is that just your truth or the truth? Because if this is just your truth, then it's just your opinion. Why should I believe it? But if it's the truth, it defeats itself. Because you're saying there is no the truth. You see, this is self-defeating. You know what the real truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen? I know it's really fashionable to say I'm living my truth. You know there's no such thing as your truth. There's just the truth. Either your opinion lines up with it or it doesn't. Now, you say, well, Frank, there are truths that just apply to me and not you. Like my name's Bill and your name's Frank. Okay, yeah, but it's still objectively true that your name is Bill and my name is Frank. Sure, there are truths that just apply to certain people, but they're still objectively true. Actually, sometimes it's not said this way. Sometimes it's said this way. It's true for you, but not for me. You've probably heard that, right? If somebody says this, if you turn the claim on itself, what would you say back? Yes, if somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, hey, is that true for everyone? Is true for you, but not for me, true for everyone? Because if true for you, but not for me is true for everyone, then true for you, but not for me can't be true because it's true for everyone. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough, but that's because it's self-defeating. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. Yeah, go to your bank teller and say I'd like $100,000 out of my account. The bank teller looks at your account and says, I'm sorry, you only have $6.12 in your account. It's easy to get the money. You simply say, ha, that's true for you but not for me. Give me the $100,000. You're going to get the money? No, if it's true there was only $6.12 in your account, that's true for all people in all places at all times when referring to you at that time. It's just true. Actually, I go to a lot of churches. I normally ask people, do you think Christianity's true? Most people will say yes, and then I'll ask them, well, why do you think it's true? You know what answer I get more than any other? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not Christianity's true? Does it change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? I mean, do you have to believe something to make it true? Do you have to believe in gravity to stay on the ground? Do people who don't believe in gravity float away? Hey, look, there's another one. Hey, if you believe, you'll come back. No, that's not the way it works. You say, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead. That's evidentiary. That's what we call in Christianity apologetics. Doesn't mean we're saying we're sorry. It means we're giving evidence for what we believe. But all the belief that in the world won't get your moral transgressions forgiven. For that, you got to go from belief that to belief in or to trust in. Look, even the demons know that God exists. In fact, James, the half-brother of Jesus, who wrote that little book in the New Testament called, you guys are sharp tonight. He said even the demons believe that God exists, but they tremble. Why? Because they don't go from belief that to belief in. Do you realize the demons know that God exists better than we do? Yeah, but they don't trust in him. To go have your moral transgressions forgiven, you have to not just have head knowledge, it's got to ultimately get to your heart and trust in it. In fact, we know this in relationships, don't we? When I first met my wife 36 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife, but all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. That's the difference between belief that and belief in. Most of the time when the Bible's talking about faith, it's talking about the second kind. After you know that it's true, trust in it. In fact, the definition of faith is trusting in what you have good evidence to believe. Trusting in what you have good evidence to believe. And when you trust in, you go from just head knowledge to not just head knowledge, but also heart knowledge. So there's a difference between belief that and belief in. How about this? You're going to hear this a lot too. There's no truth in anything but science. You guys have the top forensic science graduate program in the country. Did you guys know that here at the Thundering Herd? You guys are good at science, particularly historic science is what forensic science is. But it says there's no truth in anything but science. If someone says that to you, what question would you ask them? Yeah, simply say, hey, is that a scientific truth? Can you go in the laboratory and prove that? No, that's a philosophical claim. You can't prove that in the laboratory. In fact, you can't do science without philosophy. Science is built on philosophy. In fact, in the book Stealing from God back there, we have a chapter on science. Here's the title of the chapter, Science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. Why is that? Because all data needs to be gathered, all data needs to be interpreted, and who does that? Scientists do that. You ever wonder why you get conflicting advice on COVID? People say, follow the science. You're going to say, which science? Who said? You see, all data needs to be gathered, all data needs to be interpreted. Sometimes they're all looking at the same data, but they interpret it differently. Sometimes they've got different data, and that's why they come to different advice conclusions regarding COVID policy. Science doesn't say a word. It's scientists that say things. And if you really think about it, all truth can't come from science. So many things you have to assume in order to do science. And the most important things in life have nothing to do with science. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? I don't know. Let's run an experiment. No. How about this? You hear this a lot. You should doubt everything. Skeptical claim. Someone says you should doubt everything. You're going to turn the claim on itself and say, should I doubt that? I mean, why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? You ever notice they don't doubt that? In fact, let me ask you guys a question. How many people in here, whether you're a Christian or atheist or anywhere in between, sometimes doubt that what you believe is true? Look, if you don't have your hand up right now, you're probably not thinking very much. Of course, I've written books on this stuff, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and I go, I don't even know if this is true. You ever do that? And then I start thinking about my doubts, and I realize that my doubts are mostly emotional. They're not intellectual. In other words, the evidence for Christianity is really good, but if I'm having a good day, it looks fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. Good day, fine. Bad day, don't know. What's changing, me or the evidence? Me, I'm going up and down. The evidence doesn't change. Sometimes at events like this, I'll see atheists who used to be Christians, and they'll say, hey, Frank, I used to be a Christian, but I lost my faith. You know what I really want to say to them? So, I mean, are you telling me because your psychology changed that God has somehow popped out of existence? Since your psychology changed, all the evidence for the resurrection is no longer any good? Your psychology is not going to tell you whether something's true or false. Not just in religion, but in anything. The evidence will tell you. You know, there's a lot of people that are afraid to fly. They will not get on an airplane. Psychologically, they can't handle it. Especially from this area, right? 50 years ago. Big, terrible accident here at Marshall. And psychologically, it freaks people out. I get it. But do you realize that the safest way to get anywhere is in a plane? Your psychology won't tell you that. The evidence will. And if you start looking at the evidence, then you'll be able to draw true, valid conclusions. But if you concentrate on your psychology, you're going to be up and down all day based upon what pizza you had last night, whether it was good or bad, right? Based on your emotional state. No, what you ought to do is start concentrating on the evidence. And if you start concentrating on the evidence, then you should realize that your doubts you ought to doubt. Because if you start doubting your doubts, then you're back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys thought about doubting your doubts? I doubt it. All right, how about this? You hear this a lot too. You ought not judge. First of all, what's the problem with the claim? Yeah, someone says you ought not judge. You're going to say, isn't that a judgment? Notice this is a judgment. You say, wait a minute, Frank. Jesus said, don't judge. Nope, never said it. Sure he did. He said it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. All right, I know this is going to sound a little weird, but it's true. There are no verses in the Bible. There are no verses in the Bible. Do you think when Matthew was writing his biography, which we call a gospel, he got to the point where he said, here's chapter 7, verse 1. No. When were the chapter and verse divisions put in? About 500 years ago to help us navigate the text, which is a good thing, right? Imagine if you go to church one Sunday morning and your pastor goes, go about 2/3 of the way in. Let's see if we can figure out where we are together. No. You're going to have some numbers to help you navigate this large series of books, right? The problem is we tend to think if it's got a number in front of it, we go, oh, we can just take it out and make it say whatever we want. No, we can't. We've got to read the whole passage. What does it say? Judge not, lest you be judged by the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, you hypocrite. By the way, that's a judgment. You hypocrite, right? Take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It's actually a command on how to judge. In other words, don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, fix it, then go help your brother. But it would be completely ridiculous to say don't make judgments. Why? Number one, it's a judgment itself. Number two, you'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You made 100 judgments just coming over here tonight. Now you're wondering, was this a good judgment? This guy's kind of crazy, right? Everybody makes judgments. Atheists make judgments. What judgments do they make? There's no God. Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Bible's not telling the truth. There is no meaning to life. When you die, you're just going to become worm food. It's over. Have a nice day. No. Everybody's making judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. Who were the Pharisees? What did they do? What was their job? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They helped run Israel. Some of them were on the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council, and Rome delegated a lot of the legal authority for running day-to-day Israel to them. They were the politicians. And Jesus went after these people. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes! And he wasn't so nice doing it. In fact, if you think Jesus was a sweet guy who's never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read John chapter 2, John chapter 8, or Matthew chapter 23. What happens in John chapter 2? Jesus makes a whip and he goes and he jacks people up in the temple. Sweet and gentle Jesus did this? Yes! And then in John chapter 8, he's having an argument with these Pharisees. He's in the middle of an argument with them, and he says, your father is the devil. Jesus, you can't say that. That's not very Christ-like. Excuse me, I am Christ. Can you imagine you're having an argument with somebody, and you stop right in the middle, and you go, your father is the devil. Don't try that with a sibling, okay? And then in Matthew 23, what happens? He's talking to these same Pharisees. And he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and then once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all get along, boys and girls? No! I came to bring a sword. It's going to divide mother and daughter, father and son. Jesus was tough. Read the text for yourself. In fact, why was he killed? Two reasons. Number one, he claimed to be God. That's blasphemy to the Jews and sedition to the Romans. And number two, he spoke truth to power, especially the Jewish authorities. They knew that if Jesus succeeded, they were going to be out of a job. In fact, Caiaphas knew Jesus had resurrected Lazarus from the dead. And what did he say? He's the high priest. What did he say? He said, it's better that one innocent man die than the whole nation perish. They knew a miracle occurred, and they still wanted to kill Jesus. How rational is that? Men love darkness rather than light. By the way, I've noticed one other thing about judging. You ever notice that when you compliment somebody, which is a judgment, nobody gets upset? You know, if you say to your best friend, I really love you. You're such a wonderful person. I wish I could be like you. You think your friend's going to say, who do you think you are? Are you judging me? No, they're never going to say that. I've noticed that people don't really have a problem with judging. They just have a problem with judgments they don't like. In fact, if you tell somebody the truth and they get upset with you, you just help convict them. We love the truth when it enlightens us. We hate the truth when it convicts us. For you military guys in here, and I spent 8 years in the Navy, which, by the way, stands for never again volunteer yourself. You always get more flack when you're over the target. If you tell somebody the truth and they're shooting back at you, you're over the target. They don't want their evil deeds exposed. So everybody makes judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? We could spend a lot more time, but we don't. We got to move on. I just want to sum this whole thing up. Can everybody see that this statement right here shoots itself? Can everybody see that? And all the other statements we went through, all truth is relative. It's not, there is no the truth, just my truth. True for you, but not for me. There's no truth in anything but science. You should doubt everything. You ought not judge. And 100 other statements you hear in our culture. They're all self-defeating. They violate the law of non-contradiction. They're like saying I can't speak a word in English. They're not true. There is truth. Thankfully, otherwise you're spending a lot of money here at Marshall for nothing. Right? There is truth, and you can know it. So the next question, is it true that God exists? And before we leave question 1, I got to point one thing out. When we have the Q&A later, we'll put the mic down, and if you're an atheist here, thank you for coming. But if you're an atheist, I may ask you a question, and it's not fair for me to ask you a question without giving you a warning. So I'm going to tell you right now, here's the question I might ask you. The question is this. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand at the microphone in front of hundreds of people and say, no. No. How's that reasonable? How's that rational? It's not. The problem isn't in the head. The problem's in the heart. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God of their own lives. They're not on a truth quest. They're on a happiness quest. And they're just going to believe whatever they think is going to make them happy. And Christian, if you're a Christian here, a lot of times we do the same thing, don't we? There's a lot of inconvenient things in the Bible we don't like. And so we're not going to talk about them, or we're just still going to go our own way. So it's not a head problem. It's not about God's existence. It's really about our resistance. We don't want it to be true. So a question to ask is, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? If the person hesitates or says no, you know the problem's not in the head, it's in the heart. It's a volitional problem, not an intellectual problem. Now, let's move on to the next. Well, one other thing we got to say about the first question, does truth exist? If our reasoning is good to this point, it means that relativism and postmodernism are false. Why? They claim it's true that there's no truth. Self-defeating. Now, what's the evidence that God exists? I mentioned 3 arguments for this being. The first argument is the argument from the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. Cosmological just comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. Telos is a Greek word meaning design or purpose, and it says if there's design in the universe and design in you, life, there must be a designer. The third argument, these are scientific arguments, by the way. The third argument doesn't have any science behind it, yet it's the argument we've all known since we were very small children. It's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it says if there's one thing morally wrong out there, just one, like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million people in a Holocaust, there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no standard beyond humanity, everything's just a matter of opinion. Just your opinion against a baby torturer's opinion. Your opinion against Hitler's opinion. But we know those things aren't just a matter of opinion. Therefore, there must be a standard outside of us, a righteous standard that we're obligated to obey, and that would be God's nature. We'll get to that argument later. In fact, we're going to spend most of our time on these 3 arguments. But we're going to start right here at the first argument, the cosmological argument. Now, you got to admit, it was worth coming out here tonight just to see God do that. I mean, come on. In fact, some of you have said, I've never seen God move. Oh, really? Let's look at this again. Now, this is the argument that many say points back to the big. Now, I know there's some Christians in here going, Frank, you know, we're Christians in here, and we don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is so good that even atheistic scientists are admitting the evidence for it. Stephen Hawking was the top physicist in the world until he died about 4 years ago. You may remember Hawking had ALS. Normally, ALS will kill you in 4 years or a few years. Somehow, Hawking had it for over 40, kind of a medical miracle. Anyway, here's what Hawking said about the beginning. He said, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Hawking tried to come up with another explanation other than God. He failed, but he's admitting the data, that space, time, and matter literally had a beginning out of nothing. Agnostic astronomer or cosmologist Alexander Vilenkin wrote this about the beginning. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists, and by the way, a cosmologist is not someone that puts on your makeup, all right? Cosmologist is someone that studies the universe. Cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, there are two interesting words in this quote. The first is the word proof. Scientists don't often use that word. Why? Because science is tentative. But he's seen so many lines of evidence point toward one conclusion, that there was a beginning to space, time, and matter, that he's calling it a proof. The other interesting word is the word problem. Why is it a problem? Because if space, time, and matter had a beginning out of nothing, what could have caused space, time, and matter? It can't be a natural cause. Why? Because nature's the effect. It can't be the cause. Nature was created at this point. Now, this guy Vilenkin believes in the multiverse. Have you heard of the multiverse? That there are other universes out there, and ours just happens to be the one that looks designed, even though it really isn't. It was just kind of luck. But even Vilenkin admits, even if that's true, you don't get rid of the need for an absolute beginning. There's got to be a beginning to it all. There's other problems with the multi-universe theory we can talk about later. But he's admitting this is a problem. Now, what's the evidence that's having these scientists say that space, time, and matter had a beginning out of nothing? We're not going to go over it. Why? Number one, we don't have time. Number two, it's all in the book, chapter 3. Number three, it's not controversial. Even the atheists are admitting it. So let's just jump to the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. If the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. We got two options here. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, here's my only question. Which view is more reasonable? That no one created something out of nothing, or that someone created something out of nothing? What do you think? Yeah, number two. Well, I was at Texas A&M once, and the guy, some atheist said, I think number one is more reasonable. I said, time out, let's look at number two. Here's number two. Someone created something out of nothing. Now, that's a miracle, right? But at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone doing the miracle. Number one is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. In fact, I said to the audience that night at Texas A&M, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality. And by the way, the law of causality doesn't say everything has a cause. The law of causality says everything that comes to be has a cause. There has to be an uncaused first cause. It's either the universe or something outside the universe, because you can't create yourself. You can't go on an infinite regress of causes. There's got to be an uncaused first cause. So I said to A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously we all take the law of causality, that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. There is nobody currently sitting here tonight that as you sit here, you're worried that a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing, by nothing, in your dorm room and is currently pooping on your pillow. Right? You're not worried about that. You're not worried that a raging Bengal tiger is just going to appear out of nothing right here in the middle of this auditorium and start attacking people, right? Because you know that things don't pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause. And if the whole universe can pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause, why doesn't everything do so? Why don't Teslas pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? You wake up one morning, your Hyundai is a Tesla. And you go, how do I charge this thing? Why don't MacBook Pros pop into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? Could have saved me $4,000 if I was just a little bit more patient. Once we get through with this little talk here tonight and you're hungry and you want to have a pizza, does it make sense to order one? Or should you just sit there in your dorm room, wait, and hope one pops into existence out of nothing, by nothing, without a cause? No, it's the atheist, it seems to me, that has all the faith. Look, everyone believes in at least one miracle. Christians believe in more than one, but we certainly believe that someone created something out of nothing. Some atheists today, like Lawrence Krauss at Arizona State University, are trying to say that no one created something out of nothing. That's a miracle. But which one takes more faith? Number one takes a lot more faith. In fact, here's a question to ask an atheist. If there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? In other words, if there is no God, why does anything exist? Look, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing, and the atheists are admitting it, what could have caused that? Whatever caused space-time and matter can't be made of space-time and matter. In other words, the cause must transcend space-time and matter. The cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful to create the universe out of nothing, personal in order to choose to create, because impersonal forces can't choose to create anything. You need a choice to go from nothingness to a state of creation. Also, the being would have to be intelligent, to have a mind to make a choice. Now, when you think about a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent cause, who do you think of? God. You say, how do you know it's the Christian God, Frank? We don't. Yet. I mean, this could be Allah at this point, or some other just theistic God that created the universe. But if we keep going down the questions, like are miracles possible and did Jesus rise from the dead, we're going to realize that the same being that walked out of the tomb 1,988 years ago is the same being in whose divine nature created the universe out of nothing. You don't get there all the way with this one argument, but you get a number of attributes from this one argument. Now let's move on to the next argument, the design argument or teleological argument. There are two aspects to this. The universe appears designed and you appear designed. Let's look at the universe first. Scientists in recent decades have discovered that the universe is fine-tuned. That if you were to change any one of a number of factors about this universe, virtually imperceptibly, there would either be no universe or no universe that could support life. Let's go back to Stephen Hawking, again an atheist. He put it this way. He said if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million, a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. If the expansion rate was that infinitesimally different at the very beginning, none of us would be here. Now, you can't make any sort of evolutionary explanation for this. You can't say the expansion rate evolved to this point. Why? Because it started there. This is one of the initial conditions of the universe. Seems to me the same being that created space-time and matter is the same being that fine-tuned the expansion rate to be precisely what it needed to be for us to exist here on Earth. Also, the gravitational force, if it were altered by more than 1 in 10 to the 40th power, we wouldn't exist. What's 1 in 10 to the 40th power? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. You say, Frank, I can't get my head around that number. I know, neither can I, so let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way. You can't get that tape measure at Lowe's. Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I realize gravity's not measured in inches, but this is just to give you a scale idea in your mind. If the strength of gravity were different by 1 inch in either direction across the scale as wide as the entire known universe, we wouldn't be here. I don't have enough faith to believe that that value just landed there by chance. And oh, by the way, is chance a cause? Does chance cause things? Who caused this? Chance. He was just here. No. Chance is not a cause. Chance is a word we use to describe mathematical possibilities. Chance doesn't do a thing. You know what scientists mean when they say, well, perhaps it arose by chance or it was caused by chance? You know what they really mean? We don't know. Look, there's only two reasons that that value is here right now. Two possible reasons. It was designed to be there or it wasn't. What's more reasonable? Somebody designed it to be there. The same being that created space-time and matter and fine-tuned the expansion rate and about a dozen other of these. Change any one of them, we don't exist. Now, it's not just our universe that appears to be designed with us in mind. Our solar system appears to be designed with us in mind. Let's take a look at the solar system. Here we are, third rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away from the sun, we couldn't survive. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the goldilocks zone. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It is just right. That's a lie. It's too hot here in the summer. Axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us. Change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we couldn't exist here on Earth. Why not? Yes, because Jupiter's gravitational force is so strong, it attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. It's a cosmic vacuum cleaner. In fact, if you take a close-up look at Jupiter, these dark marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. Saturn does the same thing. In fact, here are the planets. You can see Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. Take a look at this. I'll get it. You can hardly see Pluto over here. Take a look at this. That's Arcturus. That's another star in our galaxy. Here's the sun. Jupiter is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. In fact, well, keep an eye on Arcturus for just a second. Where's Arcturus now? Look at this, way over here, next to this star, Regal. That's Antares, another star in our galaxy. The sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Jupiter is invisible. Earth, Pluto, forget about them. In fact, if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse here would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. And that's just in our galaxy. This is not outside our galaxy. In fact, the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles, and all that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. Now, how far is 30 trillion miles? Far. Take you at least 2 tanks of gas and a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. A number of years ago, my wife and I took our sons out to the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. If you ever get to go to Tucson, south side of the mountain range there, and you go out to the Desert Museum at night, if it's a clear night, you can see thousands of stars in the sky. So we're out there one night, and the guide says, it's so clear tonight that if we look up at 9:03, we will see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, oh, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guide goes, look! And we look up in the sky about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking across the western desert sky relative to us about like this. I mean, it's really moving. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what happened was, despite the fact that we were in total darkness, the space shuttle was so high up, that the sun was still reflecting off of it, and when it got out of the range of the sun, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle. 5 miles a second. Think about how fast that is. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go from our star, the sun, to another star an average distance away inside our galaxy, 30 trillion miles. In other words, how long would it take us to go 30 trillion miles if we could go 5 miles per second? How long? A long time. Yeah, you must be a math major. Yeah. It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got in the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling from our star, the sun, to another star inside our galaxy, an average distance away, you've been going 5 miles a second for 2,000 years, you would be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. We can hardly get out of our solar system. It took us 9 years to get to Pluto. Well, how many stars are there in the universe? Well, the psalmist says this, "For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those that fear him." As high as the heavens are above the earth. How high is that? Well, the Hubble Space Telescope has helped us discover how many stars there are in the universe. You know, it's circling the earth right now. A number of years ago, they trained the Hubble on 1/24 millionth of the sky. What's 1/24 millionth of the sky? Go outside tonight, put a piece of rice on the end of your finger, hold it up. That piece of rice represents about 1/24 millionth of the sky. What I'm about to show you is what they found in 1/24 millionth of the sky. This is called Hubble Ultra Deep Field. You can Google this. This little video is in the public domain. And when I start this video, first of all, I don't know if you can see this, but along the bottom here, these are mountains. This is the southern hemisphere. And they trained Hubble in the southern hemisphere. And when I start this little video, it's really just a series of pictures to get out to the 1/24 millionth of the sky. You're going to see the constellations come up. And then Hubble's going to zoom in to this little fraction of the sky. There is no audio. It's just video. Are you guys ready? Here's Hubble Ultra Deep Field. There are the constellations. Now let's zoom in. What you're looking at in 1/24 millionth of the sky is nearly 10,000 galaxies. Each galaxy containing billions of stars. How many stars are there in the entire universe? Researchers at the University of Hawaii think they figured it out. The number of stars in the universe are about equivalent to the number of sand grains on all the beaches on all the earth times 100,000. And to go from one star to another star, just in our galaxy, going 5 miles a second, will take you over 200,000 years. I don't ever want to hear anyone at Marshall University ever use the word awesome again unless you're talking about the heavens or God. Awesome shot, dude. Awesome shirt, dude. Awesome TikTok video, dude. No! What are you going to say for God? This is awesome. But the verse doesn't end there. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. You want to know what God is like? Look to the heavens. What do you see when you look to the heavens? Stars equivalent to sand grains on 100,000 earths. Over 200,000 years at 5 miles a second between those stars. It's infinite. Yeah, that's the point. Now, do you feel insignificant? You shouldn't. Why? Because the heavens, as beautiful and majestic and as expansive as they are, aren't made in the image of God, but you are. This is why God said he's going to remove our transgressions from us as far as the east is from the west. In fact, this is you in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is this animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? No, it's not a vegetable. In fact, let's go back, and here's the design in you. We just talked about the design in the universe. Let's go back to before this, let's go back to when your mother and your father got together to conceive you. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. I also see some older people in here, so I'll try and be discreet as well, just in case you've forgotten how this works. When your mother and your father got together to conceive you, your mother unconsciously perfumed her egg to attract your father, and then your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe we're the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the 3.2 billion letter genome, your software program, your DNA, that makes you you, all the letters in the right order. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other half of the 3.2 billion letter genome that makes you you, all the letters in the right order. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. You know, you have not received any more genetic information from this point until right now. Your genetic information has just duplicated itself. In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, wait a minute, Frank, you can't legislate morality. All right, no extra charge for this, friends. This is from our first book, creatively titled Legislating Morality. All laws legislate morality. Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite behavior wrong. You can't think of a law which doesn't legislate morality. The only question is, whose morality will we legislate? In fact, when people say to me, don't impose your morality on me, I go, why not? Would that be immoral? See, because you're imposing your morality on me right now. You're saying I ought not impose ought nots, but you're imposing that ought not on me. Why do you get to impose your morality, but I don't get to impose mine? Actually, the better answer is this. If somebody says, don't impose your morality on me, I say, this isn't my morality. I didn't make this stuff up. I I didn't make up the fact that murder's wrong, that abortion's wrong, that rape is wrong, that theft is wrong, that men were made for women and women were made for men, and the best way to perpetuate and stabilize society, which is the reason the government recognizes marriage to begin with, is to legally recognize the man-woman relationship over every other relationship. I didn't make any of this stuff up. This isn't my morality. This isn't your morality. This just happens to be the morality. The one Thomas Jefferson said was self-evident. The one the Apostle Paul said, the Gentiles don't have the law written on their hearts. Everybody understands this morality, but some of us don't like it. So if you have a problem with the morality, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with the Creator upon whose this morality is derived. All right, no extra charge for that. Let's go back to this. From this point in the womb, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. For most of you, anyway. Some cells became brain cells, others heart cells, others lung cells. How did they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red. Knock it off! Are you thinking about this? Are you sitting there going, time out, Frank, I got to concentrate. New red blood cells coming up. No, this is just happening. How is it happening? Aristotle recognized something 2,400 years ago. He didn't know anything about blood cells, but he did notice that all of nature is going in a direction. For example, why does an acorn, if it's properly nourished, always go in the direction of becoming an oak tree? Why doesn't it become an elm tree? Or a birch tree, or a seahorse? You say, well, it's programmed to become an oak tree. Well, who programmed it? And is an acorn conscious? Is an acorn in the ground going, all right, what do I have to do to become an oak tree? No. Yet it reliably goes in the direction of becoming an oak tree. If it doesn't have a mind of its own, yet it reliably goes in a direction, there must be an external mind directing it toward an end. This is what Aristotle called the unmoved mover. Thomas Aquinas came along in the 1200s AD and said, this is going to be my fifth way to argue for God, that all of nature's going in a direction. Well, if all of nature's going in a direction, there must be some director. Now notice, this is not an argument for a Big Bang God way back when. That's another argument. This is an argument for a creator and sustainer God every single second the universe exists. In fact, Aristotle mistakenly thought the universe was eternal. But he said there still has to be an external cause keeping everything going. All of nature is held together. It's all going in a direction. The natural laws that govern everything are sustained by a mind. This is why the Apostle Paul came along and said, in him we live and move and have our being. And that Christ holds all things together. And the writer of Hebrews says God sustains all things by his powerful word. In fact, God is to the universe what a band is to music. If a band were up here playing music, the band would be creating and sustaining the music, right? What happens to the music the second the band stops playing? Music's over. Same thing is true with God. God creates the universe. He creates you. He creates the natural laws to keep it going, and he sustains all that. If he were to pull his hand away, we'd all go out of existence. There's a lot more about that in the book, Stealing from God, if you want to go further, but we got to go to our final argument. You're probably looking at your watch going, how's he going to get through all this? This goes quicker. We're spending the most of our time in point 2. The other 2 points go quicker. But this third argument might be the most relevant of the 3, particularly in our country today, because everyone has a moral claim to something. Let me ask you guys a question. How do you know your quarterback throwing a touchdown is better than your quarterback throwing an interception? How do you know that? Well, why is it a good thing to make a touchdown? Because there is what? What do you have to know in order to know the touchdown's better? Not just the rules. The goal? Yeah, you got to know the purpose, right? You got to know the purpose of the game. Only if you know the purpose can you say your guy throwing a touchdown is better than your guy throwing an interception, because it gets you closer to the purpose of the game. If there is no purpose to the game, you can't say a touchdown's better than an interception, right? Also, notice that the purpose of the game comes from outside the game. In other words, the players just don't show up on Sunday and decide what the rules are. The rules are established before the game ever starts by the commissioner and the owners, and they tweak the rules every year, right? Well, in football, the game is arbitrary. The rules could be different, but in life, the rules aren't arbitrary. Why? Because the purpose comes from outside this life, God himself, his nature, and the rules or commands he gives us flow from his nature. If there's no God, you can't say that one particular way to live gets you closer to the purpose of life, which is good, or another way to live takes you further away. There is no good or bad if there's no best, if there's no standard, if there's no purpose. The only way this life makes any sense is if God exists. Otherwise, everything's just a matter of opinion. Also, notice this word here. What does it mean to submit? Nobody likes that word, submit. But I tell you, that's one of the most important words to your life and mine. Let's break the word up. Submission. What does the word mission mean? There's a goal. There's a purpose. And sub means you're putting your own purpose under that purpose. Look, if I'm a diva receiver and I say, man, you got to keep throwing me the ball. And the coach says, time out, we keep throwing you the ball, we're not going to win. We got to spread the ball around. If we keep throwing it to you, we're going to lose. If we want to win, we got to spread it around. And I go, okay, I get it. I'm going to submit my mission, my purpose, my goal to the overall ultimate mission to win the game. That's a good thing when I do that, right? Same thing is true in life. You can have your own mini purpose, but you're going to die and become worm food if there's no God. If there really is a God and there really is a purpose to life, you would be foolish to not to submit your little purpose to the ultimate purpose. Do you realize that if there's no God, the Nazis were not wrong? How did we convict the Nazis? The Nazis said, we were just following our government. And we said, you have a moral obligation to disobey immoral orders. Why? Because there's a morality beyond your government. It's international law. Jefferson called it nature's law in the Declaration of Independence. Paul calls it the law written on the heart in Romans chapter 2. It's God's nature. There'd be no way we could say the Nazis were wrong unless there's a standard beyond governments. Also, love is no better than rape if there is no God. Oh, you may like love better than rape, but objectively it's not better. Why? Because there's no best. There's no standard without God. You can't say that there are human rights because there are no human rights if there's no God. Where do rights come from? They don't come from governments. Jefferson said governments are instituted among men to secure rights. Government doesn't give you your rights. It secures rights. If there's no God, there's no rights to anything. I know a lot of people on college campuses have all sorts of causes. Do you know if there's no God, there's not only no right to same-sex marriage, there's no right to natural marriage. Do you know if there's no God, there's no right to abortion, there's not even a right to life. There's no rights to anything unless God exists. And if there is no God, racism isn't wrong. Slavery isn't wrong. Discrimination isn't wrong. It's just your opinion if there's no God. If there's no God, tolerance is no better than intolerance. By the way, are Christians commanded to be tolerant? No, Christians are commanded to be loving. You see, tolerance is too weak. Tolerance says hold your nose and put up with them. Love says reach out and help them. And you know how you help people? Sometimes you don't tolerate the evil they do. In fact, in our culture, people think love is approval. If you love me, you'll approve what I do. Parent. How many in here are parents? How many in here are former children? Okay. If your parents approved of everything you wanted to do, would they be loving? No. You have to stand in the way of evil. Love does not equal approval. Love equals, we'll stand for the truth. Because love always protects. Love always perseveres. Love rejoices in the truth, Paul said in the passage. Everyone reads at their wedding, but nobody obeys. 1 Corinthians 13. And if there is no God, you can't complain about the problem of evil, because evil proves God does exist. It doesn't prove he doesn't exist. You say, how does that work, Frank? Well, C.S. Lewis, early on in his life, he went through World War I, and he said there can't be a good God because there's too much injustice or injustice in the world. And then one day he had an epiphany, and he realized his argument didn't work. And here's how he wrote about it in Mere Christianity. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how would I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? You see, you wouldn't know what a crooked line was unless you knew what a straight line was. You wouldn't know what injustice was unless you knew what justice was. Something can't be immoral unless something is moral. Something can't be not right unless something is right. So evil doesn't disprove God, because evil is the standard, or I should say God is the standard by which we'd even know what evil was. See, evil doesn't exist on its own. Evil exists as a lack in a good thing. Evil is like cancer. If you take all the cancer out of a good body, you got a better body. What happens if you take all the body out of the cancer? You got nothing. Evil is like rust in a car. If you take all the rust out of a car, you got a better car. What happens if you take all the car out of the rust? You got nothing. In other words, evil doesn't exist on its own. It exists as a parasite or a lack in a good thing. Or you can put it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you got to have sunshine. Right? In other words, in order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil, but you can't have shadows without sunshine. You can't have evil without good. So if evil exists, and we all know it does, then good must exist. But for good to exist, God must exist. Otherwise, everything's just a matter of opinion. Now, there's a lot more in the books on that, but we got to move on. Let's just draw a conclusion from these three arguments. From these three arguments, we have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent, moral creator who created all these things and sustains all these things, and whose every attribute is infinite. Now, this is the God of the Bible, and yet we haven't even opened the Bible yet. Do you notice that? You don't need the Bible to know that God exists. In fact, the Bible even teaches this, Romans chapter 1. You say, wait a minute, Frank, atheists have to have some arguments against this. Actually, their arguments don't work. Why? Because if atheism is true, you shouldn't believe any arguments. What? C.S. Lewis put it best. I can't say anything better than C.S. Lewis, so I'm just going to read you what he wrote. Are you ready? Look what Lewis says. It's a 2-slide quote. Here's what he says. Suppose there were no intelligence behind the universe. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. Thought is merely the byproduct of some atoms within my skull. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? You with him so far? But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and then therefore have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I can't believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. Boom. Can't say it better than that. Unless your mind is made in the image of the great mind, why should you believe anything you think? You can believe in everything you think, or many of the things you think, because God exists. That's why. But how do we know who the true God is? For that, we got to go to number 3. And this is the shortest of the 4 points. It's pretty easy to show that miracles are possible if God exists. The problem is some people believe miracles are impossible. For example, Noah and the ark. Christians, can we just keep this between ourselves? I know it's being streamed. But let's just keep this between ourselves. Can we all agree that Noah and the ark is crazy? Thank you. A resurrection. How many people in here have seen someone rise from the dead? None of us. Yet our entire belief system is dependent on us believing something that none of us have ever seen. How rational is that? And for some reason, the big problem miracle in the Bible is Jonah. Is that a whale of a tale or a tale of a whale? I mean, what's the deal with Jonah? Can you really believe in Jonah? Well, what is the greatest miracle in the Bible? No, the resurrection's easy. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible, right? Here's the interesting thing. The atheists are admitting the data for the first verse. They don't think it's God, but what else could it be if space-time and matter had a beginning out of nothing? It's got to be a being like God that transcends space-time and matter. So, if the first verse is true, every other one of these verses is at least possible. I mean, if it's true that God created the universe out of nothing, can he do the Noah miracle? Of course Noah's crazy, unless God exists. Of course resurrections don't occur, unless God exists. Of course Jonah is silly, unless God exists. By the way, do you notice that Jesus relates two of the most controversial miracles in the Old Testament, Noah and Jonah, to his own life? Do you think Jesus thought that Noah and Jonah were historical or hysterical? He thought they were historical. Now look, a lot of people don't believe in miracles because they've never seen one. That's not a good reason to disbelieve something. Why? Because you believe in a lot of things you've never seen. You've never seen your mind, yet you believe in it, right? You believe in the laws of logic and the laws of math. You ever seen those? No. You believe in justice. Have you ever seen justice? Oh, you may have seen justice done or not done, but you've never seen justice in itself because it's not something you see. It's an immaterial reality grounded in the nature of God. You've never seen love. But you believe in love, don't you? I had a couple of debates a number of years ago with Christopher Hitchens. You guys remember who Christopher Hitchens was? He was a brilliant British atheist who sounded more brilliant than he was because he had a British accent. And in our second debate at the College of New Jersey, some student in the audience asked Christopher this question: Christopher, what is love? And Christopher, being a materialist, had to give a materialist answer. So he finally said, love is a chemical. And I said, don't tell that to your wife. Honey, do you love me? Yeah. Why? Because I got the chemical today. Tomorrow I might not have the chemical. Love is not a chemical. Love is an immaterial virtue grounded in the nature of God. You may love, you may be in love, but you've never seen love. You've never seen gravity. Frank, nope, you're seeing it right there. No, you're not seeing gravity. What are you seeing? You're seeing the effects of gravity. By the way, that's how we know God exists. We don't see God directly. We know him by his effects. If somebody asks you, how do you know God exists? You say, I know God by his effects. What's the effect? Creation is an effect. Cause, creator. Design, an effect. Cause, designer. Moral law, an effect. Cause, a moral lawgiver. Reason, an effect. Cause, a mind. You're reasoning from effect back to cause. That's what scientists do. You've never seen George Washington, yet you believe he existed. Why? Because he's left effects behind that are best explained by the cause known as George Washington. The same is true about Jesus. You're reasoning from effect to cause. And by the way, no miracles need to have occurred for Christianity to be true since Jesus and the apostles. There may have been no miracles since then, and Christianity would still be true. Now, I think miracles have occurred and still occur. In fact, if you want evidence for that, get Craig Keener's, not far from here in Kentucky. He's an unbelievable researcher, seminary professor. He wrote a 2-volume, 1,100-page, hernia-inducing set on miracles, modern-day miracles. But you don't need miracles in the current day for Christianity to be true. And by the way, if miracles do occur, they have to be rare. Why? Because if miracles were regular, if they happened all the time, we wouldn't think they were miracles. They wouldn't get our attention as special acts of God. And that's really the purpose of a miracle. It's a special act of God to get our attention. I mean, if stuff happened all the time, we'd go, hey, this stuff happens all the time. I mean, imagine if resurrections occurred routinely. What would the resurrection of Christ mean to us? Nothing. You go to somebody and you go, Jesus rose from the dead to prove he was God. And your friend goes, so what? Uncle Leroy just rose from the dead 2 weeks ago. Now I got to give the inheritance back. No, it's got to be a rare event if it's going to get our attention. So against the backdrop of natural laws, that's the only way you can identify a miracle. Now, there are a lot of things in this life that happen routinely that really are miraculous, but since they happen all the time, we don't call them miracles. For example, how many moms in here? All right, how many dads in here have seen your own kids born? Now, when you see your flesh and blood come out of another human being, you don't go, evolution, right? You go, there's something amazing here. This is incredible. But it happens every day, right? So miracles are possible because God exists. All we need to discover now is if the greatest miracle in the New Testament occurred, and that is the resurrection of Jesus. Because if Jesus rose from the dead, Christianity's true. Now, there's a lot of evidence he did rise from the dead, and I'm going to give you 8 lines of evidence. The New Testament writers are telling the truth about this. We don't have time to cover them all. I'm just going to list them, and we're going to look at 2 of them. They all begin with the letter E. Early sources. New Testament is written down early, and it's got early data in it. Secondly, eyewitness details are throughout the text. Some of these details are listed in chapter 10 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Embarrassing stories, I'll explain that in a minute, as well as excruciating deaths. These are the 2 we're going to look at. Embedded confirmation. This is the best evidence you've probably never heard of that the New Testament writers are independently witnessing the same historical event. I don't have time to explain it to you right now, but if you want to Google it, Google 2 words, undesigned coincidences. Undesigned coincidences. There have been books written on this. In fact, Lydia McGrew at Western Michigan University in 2017 wrote a book called Hidden in Plain View. Once you read about these, and there's some of them in the book Stealing from God, once you read about these, you're going to go, yeah, there's no way they could make this up. They couldn't. Undesigned coincidences. I call it embedded confirmation. Number 6, expected predictions. This is Old Testament prophecy. If I had only one prophecy to make my case on, it would be Isaiah chapter 53, written 700 years in advance about Jesus. Number 7, extra-biblical writers. There are 10 ancient non-Christian sources within 150 years of Jesus' life. Household names like Josephus, Suetonius, Thallus, Phlegon, Tacitus. You were probably reading about them earlier today, weren't you? When you take their brief references to Jesus and the apostles, you get a story congruent with the New Testament. They don't think that Jesus rose from the dead, but they say the disciples believe Jesus rose from the dead, which is pretty good confirming evidence. Finally, number 8, the explosive growth of the church. It's really hard to explain how Christianity could have come out of first century Jerusalem when 2 parties wanted to squash it, and they could have done so easily by going to the tomb and taking out the dead body of Jesus. The Jews and the Romans wanted to squash Christianity, and they couldn't do it. Why? Because the tomb was empty. Jesus was still using his body. Now, as I say, we only have time to cover a couple of these. Let's start with embarrassing stories. What are embarrassing stories? Historians know that if there's something embarrassing to the author or authors of a written text, it's probably true. Why? Because you're not going to invent things that make you look bad, that embarrass you. You might only put flattering things in the story, right? In fact, how many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look good? If you don't have your hand up right now, you're lying to make yourself look good. And it's not working. We know you're lying. All right, how many people in here have ever lied to make yourself look bad? No, you don't lie to make yourself look bad. You might lie to make yourself look good, but you won't lie to make yourself look bad. Well, the New Testament writers have filled the New Testament. By the way, it's true in the Old Testament too, but we're just looking at the New Testament. The New Testament writers have filled the New Testament with embarrassing details they never would have invented. That's why we call this the Dove factor. They're not making this up. Here's just a few of them. Notice, Peter, their leader, is called Satan by Jesus. Do you think they invented that? Do you think Mark at one point said to Peter, hey, Pete, I'm going to make this a real interesting story. I'm going to have the Lord call you Satan. What do you think Peter would have said? Have him call you Satan. Look, I'm the leader here. And then Peter says, Lord, I'll never deny you. What does he wind up doing? He denies him 3 times. And then at the crucifixion, all the disciples, maybe with the exception of John, they all run away. This is like a Monty Python movie. Run away. And who are the brave ones? Who are the brave ones? The women. The women are the brave ones. Now, who wrote the New Testament down? Men. Now, what man is going to invent that he was hiding for fear of the Jews why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb? Would any man in here invent that? No, if I was there and inventing it, I'd make myself look good, wouldn't you? I'd write down, let's see, we marched right down there and we overpowered that elite Roman guard. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Peter said, get out. John roundhouse kicked him. Philip said, we'll be back. And then on Sunday morning, we marched right down to the tomb and we saw Jesus, who congratulated us on our great faith. And then we went and comforted the trembling women. I would never say it was Mr. Sissy Pants why the women went down and discovered the empty tomb. And oh, by the way, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses in that culture? Forget about the fact it was embarrassing to men. It was. But independent of that, why would you never say the women were the first witnesses? Because in that culture, a woman's testimony was not considered on par with that of a man. So if you're making up the New Testament story, you'd only have the men be the first witnesses. Yet all 4 Gospels say the women were the first witnesses. In fact, one of them was a formerly demon-possessed woman. Oh, what a great witness. Why are they saying this? Because that's the way it really happened. They're not making it up. I had a woman come up to me once and she said, Frank, I know why Jesus appeared to the women first. I said, why? And she said, because he wanted to get the story out. I said, that is an excellent point. I had not thought of that, because ladies, when your man comes home from work, does he say much? There could have been a nuclear explosion down at the plant. He's not going to tell you. You'll see it on the news before you hear it from him. You'll be watching the news going, hey, hon, what? Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you the nuke blew up. I've been hot for 3 days. What's for dinner? Right? He's not going to tell you. I can't even believe this next verse is in the New Testament, but it is. You know the Great Commission, the end of Matthew, where Jesus says, go therefore, make disciples of all nations. Notice he doesn't say make believers. He says make disciples, right? There's a difference. Anyway, right there, with all his disciples there, in verse 17, it says this, some believed, but some doubted. He's standing resurrected right in front of them. And they're going, you see that guy over there? Yep. That guy over there is Jesus. No, I'm telling you, it can't be Jesus. He was killed not long ago. No, I'm telling you, it's him. Look, he's dead. The Romans killed him. They crucified him. It's him. They put a spear in his side. Blood and water came out. That guy's dead. It's him. It can't be. It is. How do you know? The women told me. You know, they're not making this up. There's even potentially embarrassing details about Jesus. Jesus is considered out of his mind by his own family who come to seize him and take him home. This is in Mark chapter 3. His own family thinks he's nuts. Now, you may have heard the scholars say that the New Testament writers embellish Jesus to be God. Oh, really? Then why is Mark chapter 3 in there, which is almost universally recognized to be the earliest gospel? His family thinks he's nuts. His own brothers don't believe in him. Jesus is called a drunkard. He's called demon-possessed. You think they made that up? He has his feet white with the hair of a prostitute, which easily could have been seen as a sexual advance. And oh, by the way, notice there are two prostitutes in Jesus' bloodline. Who are they? Rahab and Tamar. Do you think when Matthew and Luke got together to write down the genealogies, they said, you know what, I really think we ought to spice up the Messiah's bloodline a little bit. Let's put a couple of prostitutes in here. Let's see, Rahab, Tamar. No. They're just telling the truth, as embarrassing as it is. In fact, there's a lot of embarrassing people in the Messiah's bloodline. Judah, from where we get the term Judah, or Jew, I mean, not a good guy. David, a man after God's own heart. Yeah, but he's a liar, adulterer, and a murderer. Gee, I guess there's hope for the rest of us then. Huh? Bathsheba's in there. In fact, when Matthew gets to her in the genealogy, he won't even mention her name. What does he say instead? Uriah's wife. Ooh, that's a slam, right? But he's telling the truth. Who is Uriah? Husband of Bathsheba, whom David had killed so he could have Bathsheba. They're not making this up. It's embarrassing, but they're telling the truth. It's the ultimate no-spin zone. Do you think a Pharaoh would allow his historians to say, hey, I'm pulling your genealogy together. Let me put some bad guys in there and some prostitutes? What do you think Pharaoh would say? Off with your head. No, the New Testament's telling the truth, as embarrassing as it is. There's more in the books, but we got to move on to our final point here, and that's excruciating deaths. And this is the argument that says that these men who were in a position to know whether Jesus had resurrected or not died excruciating deaths when they could have saved themselves by simply saying, look, it never happened. Now, it's important to recognize that the writers of the New Testament, all of them with the exception of Luke, were all Jewish believers in Yahweh. Luke is the only Gentile. They all think they're God's chosen people for like 2,000 years. What motive or what did they have to gain by making up a new religion? What did they get by saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? They got kicked out of the synagogue and then they got beaten, tortured, and killed. That's not a list of perks. We're going to start a new religion. We are? Yeah. What's it going to get us? Well, first you get kicked out of the synagogue, then beaten, tortured, and killed. Well, sign me up. No, I don't think so. Right? In fact, they had every motive to say the resurrection did not happen, not every motive to say it did. If you're a Christian, maybe you get this question. I get it sometimes. Are there any non-Christian writers that talk about Jesus and the apostles? I mentioned them briefly a few minutes ago. There are. But you know what is often underneath that question? An illicit assumption. What's the illicit assumption? Oh, you really can't trust the New Testament writers. You can only trust the secular writers because the New Testament writers were biased. If you think about that for more than 10 seconds, you realize how stupid that claim is. What did these people have to gain by saying Jesus rose from the dead? Nothing. They had everything temporally to lose. In fact, my friend J. Warner Wallace, the cold case homicide detective, who's been on Dateline more than any other cold case homicide detective because he solves murders decades old, says that whenever he finds a dead body he knows has been murdered, he says, I know that guy's dead for one of only three reasons, or a combination of the three. There was either a sex issue, a money issue, or a power issue. Sex, money, or power. Those are the three universal motivators that would get people to murder one another. In fact, they're the same motivators that cause us to sin. Sex, money, and power are good things, but they're so good, sometimes we'll take shortcuts to get them. So if you're going to say the New Testament writers made this up, you've got to find one or more of those three motivators. Question: did the New Testament writers get real popular with the ladies for saying Jesus had resurrected from the dead? No. Did they make money? No, they weren't 21st century prosperity gospel preachers. Did they get power? No, they got persecuted. They got the opposite of power. Paul had power as a persecutor of the church. When he becomes a believer, he's persecuted. There's no motive to make this up. They had every motive to say it wasn't true. In fact, Jim's new book, Person of Interest, John back there is going to give away a copy before you leave. It's a great new book. You're going to want to get it. You might also ask the question, why would they die for a known lie? You say, wait a minute, Frank, if you're going to say that martyrdom proves Christianity, don't you have to say martyrdom proves Islam? No, why? Because there's a number of differences between the Muslim martyrs today and the New Testament martyrs of New Testament times. Let me just give you one difference for our purposes. The Muslim martyrs of today haven't witnessed anything that tells them that Islam is true. They just have faith. The New Testament martyrs, on the other hand, witnessed Jesus rise from the dead. They saw Jesus. They touched Jesus. They ate with Jesus. They verified with their own senses that Jesus had risen from the dead. Some people will die for a lie they think is the truth. Nobody will die for a lie they know is a lie. And the New Testament writers were in a position to know whether it was a lie or not, and they went to their deaths anyway. Look, they didn't believe a man could claim to be God. That was blasphemy. They didn't believe a man could rise from the dead in the middle of the time. They thought we'd all rise at the end of time. This was totally out of their paradigm. They weren't looking for this. Jesus went looking for them. In fact, what I'm about to say to those of you that think the Bible's inerrant like I do is going to sound like heresy for a minute, but it's not. Just stick with me. And it's this. Christianity is not true because a series of documents we put under one binding we call the Bible says it's true. In fact, Christianity would be true if the Bible never existed. You say, how can that be? Because Christianity did not originate with a book. Christianity originated with an event, the resurrection. Do you realize there were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written? How can that be? How could you be a Christian without the book of Romans? Was Paul a Christian before he wrote the book of Romans? Of course he was. That's why he wrote the book of Romans. He wrote it because Jesus appeared to him. Was Matthew a Christian before he wrote the Gospel of Matthew? Of course he was. That's why he wrote the Gospel of Matthew, to tell you what he had witnessed. Same thing is true with John and the others. In fact, we could put it this way. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. You wouldn't have a book written by Jews in the first century unless Jesus had risen from the dead. Remember, they didn't believe a man could claim to be God and it not be blasphemy. They didn't believe somebody would rise from the dead in the middle of time. This was outside their paradigm. Now, there's more on this, but you can get the book to go further. Let's sum the whole thing up. Does truth exist? Someone says there's no truth, you're going to say, is that true, right? All those other things are self-defeating. Does God exist? 3 arguments: cosmological, teleological, and moral. Are miracles possible? The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse, and even atheists are admitting the data for that. And is the New Testament true about the resurrection? Yes, we just went through a couple of 8 lines of evidence. Now, if you want to go further, you can. The book and the DVDs are back there. Don't forget to text the word evidence to 44222. No quotes, just the word evidence to 44222. We're teaching online courses now. There's a new course on the abortion issue starting today. And there's another course Sean McDowell is about to start on the LGBTQ issue. And he's teaching it, I think it starts October 18th. Check that on our website. We're on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. In fact, we're on YouTube right now. Check out our YouTube channel. 2 words in the YouTube channel search, cross-examine. In fact, we're so into YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, we've actually combined these 3 into one social media platform. We call it YouTwitface. It's kind of a Jersey thing. Have you signed up for YouTwitface yet? We're on Instagram as well. We've got a podcast, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. We've got DirecTV on Wednesday night. It's also on Roku, and it's streamed on our website. And if you don't do anything else, download the Cross-Examined app. 2 words in the App Store. Cross-Examine, And it's got our podcasts on there. It streams the TV show live. And it also has a quick answer section on there. So you can get answers right off your phone as you're talking to somebody. All right? All right, before you get to your questions, it's true. The question we got to ask is, so what? So what if it's true? Well, here's the big so what. Someone actually did die for you. It's true. Now, when I was in the Navy, I was in naval aviation, and you had to earn golden wings, which were fairly hard to earn. But there's nothing more difficult to earn in the Navy than a golden trident. That's what the SEALs wear. Very few people that start SEAL training make it through. 5-10% maybe. Those that do make it through wear that trident with pride. It is literally their military identity. When Michael Monsoor was buried in Rosecrans Cemetery just outside of San Diego, just about every Navy SEAL on the West Coast showed up for his funeral. And when they passed his casket, they took off their tridents and they pressed them into his casket. They took their identity and put their identity in their Savior, the one that died for them. That's what we're supposed to do. But our culture says, no, put your identity in your political party, or put your identity in your ethnic group, or put your identity in your race. There's only one race, the human race. Or put your identity in your sexual orientation, or your boyfriend, or your girlfriend, or your spouse, or your vocation, or your bank account. You know, none of those things are ultimate, ladies and gentlemen. We were all meant to put our identity in our Savior. And a man who was there and was an eyewitness to this, in fact, he wrote a biography we call a gospel. His name was John. He said that God has given you the right to become a child of God by accepting what Christ has done. Do you know Christianity is the only worldview where you don't achieve your identity, you receive your identity? There's nothing you can do to achieve your identity. You just receive it. You accept it as a free gift, which takes all the pressure off you. Because if you have to achieve your identity, there's always someone that can do it better. You're never going to think you're going to measure up. But if you receive your identity, if you're adopted into the family of God, and you're an heir to the throne, all the rewards he gives you, that's secure. There's nothing you can do to earn it. He's earned it. Why wouldn't you accept the free gift? Have you accepted the free gift of what Christ has done for you? If you haven't, why haven't you? He didn't just die. He also rose again to prove he's God. Now, with that being said, we're going to go to questions. And just before we go to questions, John wants to give away a book. John, you want to pass out the survey? If you want to get a free copy of Person of Interest, which is a book written by my co-author, or my friend actually, J. Warner Wallace, it's the most unique book. And we must be out of time. No. You want to fill out that little card he has and drop it off at the table. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And John, when do you, because John and his group talk about these kinds of issues every week. Thursday night, where?
At 7 o'clock across the building, on the other side of the building, room 2W16.
Room 2W16, Thursday nights at 7, right in this building. So if you want to be a part of a group that talks about evidence-based issues and questions and answers, come to it. And you're meeting this Thursday too, right? Okay, Thursday, 7 p.m. All right. All right. As we're doing that, we got a mic set up, as you can see, right back near their cameras. So if anyone wants to ask a question, and no one likes to ask the first question, so we're going to move right on to the second question. You just got to go back to that mic so everyone can hear you, because it's streamed live right now on YouTube, and they won't hear you if you just ask it independently. For the rest of you, John has given you a survey. Also, if you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback. Hang on a second. If you text the word event to this phone number right here, we're going to send you 2 or 3 questions. You can help us improve this seminar. So please do that. You don't have to do it right now. You can do it in the morning, but you'll probably forget if you do it in the morning. So if you can do it now, that'd be great. All right. Yes, sir. Isaiah.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, Isaiah. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So if the universe is so big, right? Like as you said, and we're in like a Goldilocks zone, I mean, couldn't it be said that since it's like an eternity big, right? I mean, infinitely big, then there would be a guaranteed chance that another Goldilocks zone would happen because there's an infinite amount of possibilities?
Good question. There's not an infinite number of possibilities because even though the universe is enormously, unimaginably vast, it's still limited. In fact, the universe right now is expanding. It's accelerating. What's it expanding into? Nothing. It's not expanding into space, it's creating space. But atheists, Peter Ward, I think, is one of them. I'm trying to think of the authors of the book called Rare Earth. They're atheists. And despite the enormous universe, they personally believe there's no other place that has all the qualifications that we have for life. Look, even if you have all of those factors for life, that doesn't mean you're going to get life. There's a difference between a necessary condition and a sufficient condition. Right here, we have a necessary condition for a fire. We've got fuel. This whole building is fuel, right? But it's not a sufficient condition. You need a spark. You need a flame to get the fire started, okay? Just because you have a habitable planet doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have life there. You just have a necessary condition, but you then need life to be created somehow for life to exist.
Okay, cool. Can
right.
I get one more?
Sure, go ahead. That's it. You're done. Thanks.
Okay. All
no.
right, let's see.
No, go ahead.
What's the best way to better my faith with God? Like I have a good relationship with Him, but I don't want that teeter-totter all the time in my emotions. So what's the best way?
Well, there's some of the disciplines: reading, prayer, meditation, getting with a good church and a group of believers, and also serving in that group. Not just being a consumer. You see, in America, we're consumers. We don't like this church because we're not having our needs met. So we go to another church, right? Until we don't have our needs met there. And then we go to another church instead of going to a church and saying, what can I do to help serve the body and serve the community? Remember, the purpose of church is not only to worship God, but to equip the saints to do ministry, Ephesians 4. So we're supposed to be doing the ministry in the church. So if you do those things, if you study, if you read, if you meditate on God's word, if you pray, and if you have a good group of people you can get together with to worship God and also serve with, that's the way you can grow. And
you
of
got
course,
it.
Other things you can do as well. You can go to Southern Evangelical Seminary, where I went, ses.edu.
Hey, thank you, man. Really appreciate
All right.
it.
Thanks, Isaiah. Yes. What's your name?
My name's Josie.
Hey, Josie, go ahead.
I was wondering if you think being gay is right.
Okay, when you say being gay, what do you mean by that?
I mean having basically a girl likes a girl. Like if
You mean having the feelings that you like somebody else who's the same sex?
and like being their girlfriend and getting married and all
Okay.
that stuff.
Well, it doesn't matter what I think because I'm not the moral arbiter of the universe, okay? If God exists, and He does, and if Jesus is God, and He is, then there's only one kind of sexual relationship that is directing you toward the purpose of life. And the purpose of life is to know God and to make him known. And that one kind of relationship is between a man and a woman in one relationship for one lifetime. Marriage between a man and a woman. Every other kind of sexual relationship is illicit according to Jesus, the apostles, and the Bible.
Okay, I also have a disagreement with you about the Big Bang Theory.
That's okay, go ahead.
How do you think that everything formed by like God sent like an asteroid and like it banged into everything, or do you think like he sent like a bang to create like the planets, then the waters, then the animals, then like...
Well, the Big Bang Theory isn't what I agree with. I just agree with the evidence for the Big Bang, that there was a beginning. And if there was a beginning, there must be a beginner. See, the Big Bang Theory is just saying there was a beginning. How it began, secularists will say we don't know. I'm saying if space-time and matter had a beginning, then whatever created space-time and matter must transcend space-time and matter. The cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, and intelligent. Those are the attributes of what could be the Christian God. And you've got to do more work to see if it is the Christian God. You've got to see if Jesus rose from the dead, as we just did a few minutes ago. But if Jesus has risen from the dead, then he's the being that created the universe out of nothing.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Josie. Good questions. Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Gerald Grubbs.
Hey, Gerald. Yeah, just move that up a little bit. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. You mentioned, evidence and...
Get a little closer, if you would, to the mic.
You mentioned about evidence and miracles being rare.
Uh-huh.
I've got a comment, but I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
I think the greatest thing we can do is, as Christ followers, is go out into the world and tell what he has done for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the greatest things we can do, start conversations and bring the truth to the world.
Yes.
That being said, last June of 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 4 anal carcinoma cancer. I had it in my esophagus, stomach, neck, aortic artery going to my heart. Too many cells to even count, the doctor said. She gave me 1 year to live. As of last week, all my cells have disappeared.
All right. Amen.
And a lot of that come from a lot of crying out to God, of course, in the beginning. But I made a decision to get out of God's way and raise my faith level. And I believe that's what started the whole thing. That being said, I want to know a little bit about you and how God has, God's evidently working in your life and putting this together. And you've got lots of study to study yourself approved. I just wondered if you had something brief about yourself and how God's worked in tandem with your studies.
Well, I grew up in the Catholic Church because I'm from New Jersey and it's the law.
Yeah.
And I went to Catholic high school, but growing up, I never really knew who Jesus was. And it wasn't until I got into the Navy that I met the son of a Methodist minister, and I had so many questions for him. He finally said, look, you just need to get Josh McDowell books. Evidence demands a verdict in More Than a Carpenter. So I read those books, and I said, wow, this really looks like it's true. And I became a Christian in about 1985. When I got out of the Navy, I happened to meet Norman Geisler, who at the time was sort of the Michael Jordan of apologetics, or Steph Curry of apologetics. And he was starting a seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we were living in the D.C. area. So 6 months later, we moved, my wife and our 3 sons, 5 and under, we moved to Charlotte to go to SES, Southern Evangelical Seminary, and I had the privilege to travel with Dr. Geisler for a while. We wrote a couple of books, Legislating Morality, and I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. And then in 2007, I started this ministry called crossexamine.org with a bunch of other people to go to mostly to colleges, high schools, and churches and present the evidence that Christianity is true. And so that's what we've been doing. And that's what we try and continue to do. And I could see God's hand in it looking back. I mean, why would I meet Norman Geisler? Where did that come from? It came out of nowhere. Okay?
Well, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name's Sam.
Hey, Sam.
Hey. I had a question. I'm kind of looking for your definition of what it means to be born again. Jesus said that a man must be born again to enter the kingdom of heaven. And through my experience with talking to Calvinists, they say you have to first be indwelt with the Spirit before you can even say yes to salvation. But in the Old Testament, for my knowledge, no one was ever indwelt with the Spirit, but we know like Abraham was saved. So what is your definition then of being born again?
Well, the Calvinistic viewpoint is, as you said it, that God has to regenerate you before you can believe, because they say we're dead in our trespasses and sins. I don't think the way that the Calvinists interpret that is correct. I think when it says we're dead in our trespasses and sins, it means there's nothing we can do to make up for that, that Jesus is the only way that we're going to ever be reconciled to God. However, I think we can accept that offer that Christ gives us in order to be saved. Because, look, if God has to regenerate us before we can believe, and yet God wants all to be saved, why isn't everyone saved then? He does want us all to be saved, yet only he regenerates some. That appears to be a contradiction to me. It also appears to be a contradiction to say that we can have love without free will. If we don't have free will, how can we love? We're not moist robots, as the atheists say. So I have some issues with the hard five-point Calvinism view. I also think, tragically, it makes God the author of evil. You say, why does it make God the author of evil? Well, I'll give you a little story that went back to Dallas Theological Seminary a number of years ago. My co-author, Dr. Norman Geisler, who actually wrote a book called Chosen But Free, later after this debate, was debating a Calvinist by the name of John Geisler. And during the debate, Geisler asked Geisler, does man have free will? And Geisler said, yes, man has free will to do what he desires, but God gives him the desires of his heart. So Geisler asked, well, who gave Adam the desire to sin? And Geisler said, mystery. And Geisler said, contradiction. Now you're making God the author of evil. See, that seems to be a problem in my view anyway, making God the author of evil. God is not Allah. He's not arbitrary. He's good. He allows evil. He may bring judgment on us, but he is not the author of evil. He gives everybody the ability to respond to him, but only some of us do, because we resist the Holy Spirit. We don't want there to be a God. We want to be God of our own lives. So I think we have free will, that we can respond to God's call to the Holy Spirit, going out to all the world, convicting the world of sin. But some of us don't want to be convicted. We want to go our own way.
Okay. So would you say that a biblical definition then of being born again would be to receive a new heart and we become new creatures, and then being indwelt by the Spirit is the inheritance of our faith?
Yeah, Ephesians 1, you're sealed with the Holy Spirit when you believe. Paul says in Romans chapter 10, he says that if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus has risen from the dead, you will be saved. Okay. Yes. Okay. It's a conscious decision. Look, Jesus said, if you're not with me, you're against me. So it's a conscious decision to repent and accept what Christ has done.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sam. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy.
Is someone that's dyslexic agnostic, does that mean they believe or they wonder if there is a dog?
I got you. The rest of them did. It's late, Jeremy. Okay. It's late. Go ahead.
You've answered the question before, but I can't find it online anywhere. Mm-hmm. So someone asked you, how is there only one God? Like you explained how there can only be one God. Mm-hmm. It only makes sense if there's only one God. Could you go through that again?
Well, it's probably best demonstrated with a slide. So stand by for vectors, Victor. Call for clearance, Clarence. Roger, Roger. Do we have any airplane fans in here? I mean, come on. There can only be one infinite being. Why? An infinite being lacks nothing, correct? For two beings to differ, one must lack something the other has, right? But a being that lacks something is not infinite. Therefore, there can be one only infinite being. And look, there's got to be a being that is uncomposed. Everything in the universe is composed. The universe is composed. It's made of parts. I'm made of parts. You're made of parts. The universe is made of parts. But if we're composed, someone must have composed us. And you can't go on an infinite regress of composers. You've got to get back to an uncomposed composer. This uncomposed composer isn't made of parts. His essence equals his existence, as Aquinas would say. He just is. He is the great I am. That's what the Bible calls him. In fact, Jesus said to the Pharisees, before Abraham was born, I am. What's he quoting? Who's he quoting? He's quoting Exodus 3:14, the burning bush. Do you remember when God appeared to Charlton Heston? And Moses says to God, who should I tell the Israelites you are? And God says, tell them I am sends you. What does I am mean? I am means the self-existent, eternal one. The being that had no beginning, the being that had no end, the being that just bees. His essence equals his existence. He is to be. He's infinite. He doesn't lack anything. He's totally maxed out, totally actualized, as Aristotle and Aquinas would say. See, we're a combination of what's called actuality and potentiality. We have the potential to change, to grow, to learn, to forget, to change, to alter. God doesn't have any of those potentials. He's completely maxed out. He's the complete, actualized, uncomposed, infinite being, and there can only be one.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Hi, my name's Justin.
Justin, go ahead, sir.
Dr. Frank Turek, I have a question about presuppositional and evidential apologetics.
Yes.
And can you explain both and why you choose one and not the other?
Okay. I'm not an expert in presuppositional apologetics, but what I've seen about it, if I understand it correctly, is that you have to presuppose that the Bible is true in order to know anything. And I don't think that's the case. Okay, you can know a lot of things without the Bible being true. You can know that the sun goes, or the earth goes around the sun. You can know many things about natural revelation. The sun comes up in the east. That water flows downhill. I mean, you can know a lot of things about nature without the Bible. I think evidentiary apologetics, which is what we've been doing here, makes more sense because you have to start with truth. Because, today some people don't even believe in truth. So you have to start there. And then you can move on to God, miracles in the New Testament. Now, I think one of the problems that the presuppositionalists run into is they will run into the problem when they say you have to believe the Bible in order to know anything else. If they run into a Muslim, the Muslim could say, you just have to believe in the Quran. Well, why should I believe the Quran and not the Bible? Or the presuppositionists might say, well, let me give you evidence as to why the Bible is true then, and not the Quran. Now you're back to the evidentialist approach, though, right? In order to show the Bible's true, you got to go through the stuff we just went through. So I think in any event, you're going to get back to what's called the evidential approach or the classical approach, which is what we're trying to do here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Dr. Anthony.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey, first of all, I just want to thank you for doing this. This is super cool. Actually, when I first started looking into Christianity and taking it seriously, you were one of the first voices that I ever heard on the Unbelievable podcast.
With Justin Brierley.
Yep, that one.
Yes.
Great
podcast, by the way.
Great.
It's a debate podcast. Look it up. Unbelievable.
So one of my questions for you is just kind of something that I've run up against lately, a wall kind of that I'm working through. I believe in inerrancy. Have no doubts about the resurrection, things like that. However, I've come to a spot lately with the genealogies you made reference to. In Matthew 1 and in Luke 3, the genealogies of Christ are very different at points. They diverge, and it seems there's so many different voices with so many different opinions about whose genealogy is what. And I guess my question for you is how do we make sense of those differences, and does that affect how we think about the resurrection or anything else? Does anything else kind of become shaky because of
well, as I understand it, the two genealogies, Matthew and Luke, are tracing different bloodlines.
Okay.
One is tracing Mary's bloodline, and the other is tracing Joseph's bloodline.
Okay.
So they're going to be different. Secondly, there's a book out there that my co-author wrote called The Big Book of Bible Difficulties by Norman Geisler and Thomas Howe, both professors at our seminary. Dr. Geisler's since passed on, but Thomas Howe is still there. That book has a lot of answers to these kinds of questions.
Okay.
Thirdly, genealogies may be organized in such a way as to make a point. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it may be Matthew's genealogy, which is in blocks of 14.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's trying to make some sort of point. It's not meant to be an exhaustive genealogy.
Okay.
It's meant to make some sort of point based on the number 14.
Okay.
And so, remember, inerrancy means that the Bible's inerrant in all that it teaches. And we have to take it in the sense that an ancient reader would have taken it. Not in our modern 21st century sense, because people that lived 2,000 years ago didn't have our perspective. So the text wouldn't mean anything to them if they had to have our mindset. We can have their mindset, but they can't have our future mindset. Okay. So we have to bring ourselves back to the time of the writing to try and understand what the writing means.
Okay.
And that's going to be true of any revelation. If God's going to have a consistent revelation, He's got to make it comprehensible to every period of time. And so that's why you got to put yourself back in the mind at the time of the writing.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Anthony. What's the matter? You guys can't stay for 4 hours? I mean, please, come on. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Ashley.
Hey, Ashley.
I used to be a part of a very fundamentalist network of churches, I guess. It was called International Christian Church or International Churches of Christ.
Yes,
and
I know who you speak of, because I was in that, not completely, but when we first became Christians, we met people from the Boston Movement Church of Christ who were very zealous but also very legalistic.
Yes.
Yes.
So one of their biggest doctrines was that you were saved through the act of baptism. And something that would exclude you from salvation was, even if you were baptized, not being baptized with the knowledge that you're being baptized for your salvation. Very detail-oriented.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know what are your beliefs on where does baptism play into our salvation and our Christianity?
Yes, baptism is a sign you're saved. It's not a sacrament to make you saved. In fact, I think the easiest way of demonstrating this is if you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul, in the context of saying, look, don't follow me, don't follow Apollos, follow Jesus, because he's talking to factions within the church at Corinth, and he gets to the point of baptism, and he says, look, were you baptized in my name or baptized in Apollos' name? Or no, you're baptized in Jesus' name. He says, I don't even know who I baptized, except for a couple of people that I can remember now. He said, I did not come to baptize, I came to preach the gospel. So he's bifurcating, in other words, he's separating the gospel and baptism. And then if you go to Romans 1, remember we're just in 1 Corinthians 1, go to Romans 1, he says, the gospel saves. So in 1 Corinthians 1, if baptism is not part of the gospel, and in Romans 1 the gospel saves, then baptism is not part of salvation. It's a sign of salvation.
So then what do you make of scriptures like 1 Peter 3:1, I think, where it says, and this baptism that now saves you also, or in the Great Commandment, or what is it, the Great Commission, when Jesus is commanding the disciples to go and make more disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Well, remember, baptism was a sign of salvation then. And when you got baptized publicly, you were essentially putting a target on yourself. Because in that culture, that was something that obviously wasn't accepted. It wasn't until the 300s AD did Christianity became tolerable in the Roman Empire. So it's a sign of salvation. It is not a requirement for salvation. Otherwise, Paul wouldn't have said, I don't even remember who I baptized, right? He said, I came to preach the gospel. These other verses you're bringing up, like 1 Peter 3, is a notoriously difficult passage to uncover, okay, or to, I'd say, to interpret properly. And the Acts chapter 2, where he says, repent and be baptized, every one of you, for the forgiveness of your sins. Okay, Peter says it there, but that word there could be translated, repent and be baptized with a view toward your salvation. And the other times Peter and the other apostles in Acts talk about being saved, they don't mention baptism. Why is that? Because it's not an essential part of salvation. It is something that we are commanded to do, and we should do, but we're saved before we do it. Obviously, the thief on the cross was saved. He never got baptized either, did he? So Cornelius was saved prior to, I'd have to look, that's Acts chapter 10. Okay? So I know that when you have a group of people get so zealous about a particular thing, and they bring their proof text to it, it can sometimes take a while to psychologically let go of those proof texts. But I can't see why Paul would have said, I don't even care who I baptized, I don't remember who I baptized, if baptism was so important to salvation. He never would have said that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks, Ashley. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Hello. My name is Josh.
Hey, Josh, go ahead.
And I was... Really, I had my own personal journey through life and stuff like that, and I was just wondering, through all the ups and downs that, I've had all the way up to now being, 23, only recently have I really started to run towards the faith that I have now. And the one question that, is always on my mind whenever I wake up now is, like, how do I become as close or as much like Jesus as I can? Because now the main thing that is on my mind is, like, how do I put that same energy, that same, spiritualness into the world? How do I try to be as close to him as possible?
It's a similar question to what Isaiah asked before, that you have to practice the disciplines, obviously study, not just the Bible, but also theology and philosophy and apologetics. Why is this true? Study, meditate, pray, get a group of people around you who you can serve with and learn from and teach others. And very few things are mastered with casual contact, right? I mean, to use a sports analogy, the best guys in the NFL, the best guys on the PGA Tour, the best guys in the NBA, the best guys in any sports league didn't just show up one day and start being superstars, right? Took a lot of work, a lot of effort, and the same thing is true if you want to be closer to God. It does take work. It does take effort. Mm-hmm. It does take an effort to try and learn more and to try and be a follower of Christ. It doesn't happen through osmosis.
Okay,
appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Dr. Turek. I have a couple of build-up questions because I'm not sure if this makes much sense.
Yes, what's your name?
Ben.
Okay, Ben, go ahead.
My first one would be, how would you describe omnipotence and omniscience?
Well, omnipotence is all-powerful and omniscience is all-knowing.
Would you say that God is omniscient and omnipotent?
Yes.
So, would you say that God created the laws of logic and has power over them?
No.
Why not?
God is there. Those laws flow from his nature. They're not arbitrary. Just like his moral laws aren't arbitrary. The natural laws that he created the universe with could have been different, but if they were, we wouldn't be here. The way the universe is set up, The natural laws are precisely fine-tuned, but they're not a reflection of his nature, like, say, the law that you should love God and love your neighbor. That's a reflection of his nature. But the laws of nature itself, the laws, gravity, strong and weak nuclear forces, electromagnetism, those laws of nature, they could have been different. They're not a direct reflection of God's nature.
So you would say that God could not make something that's simultaneously a square and a circle?
No, he couldn't, because that would contradict his nature. That would contradict reality.
So he couldn't enact miracles over the laws of logic?
Miracle? No. Okay. It would be like he's not going to contradict his nature. He's not going to contradict his nature in logic or contradict his nature in morality either.
Okay, that answers my question then.
Okay. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
I'm Sierra.
Hey, Sierra.
I have 2 questions for you, actually. I don't know if this is going to stay or not. Okay.
Go ahead.
My first one is about women in leadership in the church. I was wondering what your thoughts are surrounding what biblically our allowances are as far as positions that we can take in church ministry, whether that be like deacon, elder, pastor, things of that nature. So that's my first one.
Okay, I think from the scriptures, the way I read Paul, and these are controversial verses, as you know, but I think the way we read Paul is all people in the church are equal in terms of our essence. We're all made in the image of God, but we have different functions. And so it appears that God wants the men to be the senior pastor, and women can be just about everybody else, although he does talk about the elders being in a male sense, the wife or the husband of one wife kind of thing. So I think that women can be teachers. I think women can be engaged in ministry throughout the church. I think, though, the senior pastor, according to what I read in the New Testament, should be a man. That's just the way it's done. And for someone to say, well, I don't want to submit to God's function, then we're not following Jesus. Because notice, Jesus has the same essence as the Father, but he has a different function. He voluntarily submits his will, if he has a different will than the Father, in order to fall in line with God's overall mission. And we're all called to do that. We're all called to submit. In fact, Paul says submit to one another. And as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, submit is a bad word in our culture, but in reality, if God exists, and he does, the most intelligent thing we can do is to put our own mission under his, to submit our will to his.
Great. And my second question is, how can we pray for you?
Oh, well, thank you. You can pray that we have opportunities to do this on a college campus more. We haven't been able to do it for 18 months until these past couple of weeks. This is our 3rd event in about 18 months. So you can pray for that. You can pray that God protects us where we go. You can pray that we get more people to do this, because we're always looking for people that can go out and interact with others and try and present them the truth that Christianity is true. So if you would pray for those things, pray for protection, pray for opportunities, pray for more people to be able to come and present this way and answer questions, not just at colleges, but at churches and high schools and wherever we can.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Thank you for that ask, Sierra. I appreciate that. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Kelby.
Hey, Kelby, go ahead.
Okay. Technical difficulties over here. Thank you. So, you were kind of touching on it earlier a little bit about baptism. And my background is I grew up in a Church of Christ.
Yes.
I no longer do because, but now pertaining to it, I lead the question to, I have a friend who is a Lutheran. Okay. And I respect him. He knows a lot of biblical knowledge, and he's got a degree in apologetics at Liberty University. I highly respect him, but when he posts on Facebook, when I have discussions with him, I'm puzzled about what they believe. For one, they may say in one hand, you're saved by faith alone through grace alone. But at the same time, they will say statements like, well, the water's connected with the word. And I don't understand what that means, the second statement. I was figuring, hope that you may be able to help me have some clarity of what that means.
I'm not a Lutheran, so I don't know. I would ask him. In fact, there are questions you should ask people when they say something. Like if he says the water is connected with the word, it's not your job to refute what he says. It's his job to support what he says. So the first question you want to ask him is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean the water's connected with the word? Secondly, how did you come to that conclusion? Because you want evidence, or him to provide evidence for his position. Just asserting the water's connected with the word is just an assertion. It's not an argument. So you want to get evidence for that. And then if you have something to say back to counter what he said, if you don't agree with what he said, then you can go to the third question. And the third question is, have you ever considered, and then fill in the blank, whatever that is. Have you ever considered that you're using, say, a figure of speech and taking it literally, if that's in fact what you're doing, okay?
Right.
So I think those three questions, which are in our app, the Cross-Examined app, and those three questions, which really come from Greg Kokel's great book, Tactics, can help you with any issue. What do you mean by that? How'd you come to that conclusion? Have you ever considered? In fact, Josie over here, who asked the question about, is it okay to be gay? What was my first question? What do you mean by being gay? What does that even mean? I know what people think it means, that my orientation is fixed and there's nothing I can do about it, but is that really the truth? Okay? So you need to ask the question.
Okay.
And having a certain orientation, does that force you to engage in the behavior? No, not necessarily. So I think you have to ask questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Have you ever considered?
Okay. And I have a second question.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And so maybe this may not make much sense, but can pertain to when I speak to people about their views on where I'm pro-life and someone else might be pro-choice. Okay, and automatically some people might get refuted. They may get angry, of course. Maybe they may look at me like, you have no clue what you're talking about. Do you think maybe that there is something that the people who are pro-life have some sort of the truth that they're not telling us, or you think they're trying to communicate something that we're not getting, people who are pro-life?
Pro-life or pro-choice? What do you mean?
That a pro-choicer may say, you don't get it, like there's something you're not getting, like they're wants to communicate something. Maybe are they trying to say, well, what about us women? Do you care about us? Do you, obviously we're for, the sanctity of life.
Right.
But what about the woman? Do you care about us too? Or
right.
Things like that. Do you believe that do you believe there is an absolute truth, maybe that they are not speaking or having clarity to tell us?
Look, sometimes I think people haven't thought the whole issue through. For example, my brother-in-law was talking to a friend of hers that claims to be a Christian, but she was pro-choice, really pro-abortion on this issue. And she was saying, what about the woman's right to choose? And he said to her, what about the baby's body? What about his or her right? And you know what she said? I never thought about that. Never thought about it.
Well, do you think...
Now, that might be shocking to pro-lifers. What do you mean you never... But some people haven't. So you have to try and show them that, in fact, there's a human being in there. In fact, there is a video on our website, on our YouTube channel. Actually, let me direct you somewhere else. Go to caseforlife.com or .org, one of the two, caseforlife.com, caseforlife.org, and there's going to be a video that's going to be on that homepage. It's 52 seconds. If you watch that video and still consider abortion to be a moral right, I can't believe. Not you. Anybody out there.
Okay.
If you watch that video and you still think abortion is a moral right, I'm questioning your moral judgment dramatically.
I can know all the evidence too. Like I mentioned you before the event, I mentioned to you, I said I've been reading Case for Life by Scott Klusendorf.
That's Scott's website, caseforlife.com.
Yeah.
He's starting to teach a course today called The Ethics of Abortion. And if you go to crossexamine.org and click on online courses, you can still join it. He's the best pro-life speaker, I think, in the country. And that 52-second video I show to people, and I say, are you still pro-abortion after seeing this? Because what you're going to see are 3 different stages of abortion. Abortion of like a few weeks old, abortion mid, second trimester, and abortion in the 3rd trimester.
Right.
It's just the truth.
Okay, and one more follow-up with that. I promise I'm done. Okay, so with that being said, with being pro-life, pro-choice, and all that, okay, do you also think that maybe morally overall, you think they are really considering abortion, or do you think that's maybe their last pit stop? Because maybe do you think maybe that they don't want to get rid of the baby? Do you think that maybe they want people to direct them to resources and help and counseling and so forth? Or do you think they derive abortion off of because no one's not giving them help?
I think it depends on each individual case, obviously. The problem is the way the laws are in our country now, it gives men the ability to pressure women to kill their children.
Okay.
It makes men free to get rid of the consequences of what they've done. In fact, anybody can pressure a woman, the parents, the boyfriend, friends, because it's legal. Also, my wife told this to our 3 sons growing up. She said, any woman you have sex with, you have given the right to kill your child.
Wow.
And that's true. Even if you're married, that's true. The father has no right, according to the law, to protect his own baby. Now, by the way, if you're in here and you've had an abortion, or you're watching out there and you've had an abortion, this is not to condemn anybody. It's just to prevent anybody from moving ahead with such a terrible decision. There's forgiveness under the cross. All sins are forgivable. We just don't want you to make a tragic mistake, a sin, to kill a child. There are many people that will take that child if you don't want it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
What's going
again?
on, Dr. Frank Turek? How are you?
Good. What's your name?
My name's Josiah.
Hey, Josiah, go ahead.
Okay, so my own beliefs aside, looking through different religions, I see a lot of similarities on specific dates or accounts, like December 25th or the number of disciples or prophets. I was wondering, why are there so many connections to so many different religions out there? Excuse me. And yeah, just kind of like if you can elaborate on that, you know what I mean? Like why so many different doctrines or so many different resemblances between different religions?
Okay, first of all, the stuff you see on the internet about other ancient gods having 12 disciples and being born of a virgin on December 25th is all bunk, okay? It's not properly researched.
Gotcha.
The Zeitgeist movie isn't true. With that being said, though, there are certain commonalities among world religions. And my friend J. Warner Wallace, in his brand new book, Person of Interest, points out this might have been a way that God was preparing the world for the real Messiah, the true Messiah. In fact, C.S. Lewis himself was always intrigued by sacrificial gods in pagan myths. It was J.R.R. Tolkien, the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings, who was a friend of C.S. Lewis and was part of a study group with C.S. Lewis, who convinced him that although Lewis was moved by these pagan God stories, he was never moved by the true myth,
right,
the Jesus story. And what he meant was that the Jesus story is literally true. what he called the true myth. But all those other myth stories were preparing the hearts of men in the first century to accept the true rising God, and that was Jesus of Nazareth. And Jim lays it out beautifully in Person of Interest, so you want to pick up that book.
Appreciate
and in
it.
fact, tune in on Thursday night, this Thursday night at 9 Eastern, because I'm going to have Jim on the Hope One live stream right here on YouTube, and he's going to explain that.
Gotcha. Thank you so
All right,
much.
Thank you. All right, yes, sir. What's your name?
Yes, my name is Dean.
Hey, Dean.
And my question is this. If God is loving and does not create evil, how do you explain the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which killed 230,000 people, and more than 2/3 of those killed were women, children, and the elderly?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Dean. If God, why evil? We talked earlier in the session that it doesn't disprove God because, thanks, Clint, because nothing would be evil unless there was a purpose to life and a standard for good. And that can only exist if God existed, right?
Yes.
But now if you're asking, well, why does this particular evil occur? I can't answer why that particular evil occurs. I can't answer why it occurs, but I know why I don't know why. I'm stuck in time. You're stuck in time. We can't see the end from the beginning. God can. In other words, there's a ripple effect for everything that occurs, good and bad. Think about everything that has occurred in history for you to be sitting here tonight. I mean, just think about your parents. They had to meet, and their parents' parents had to meet, and their parents' parents' had to meet, and their parents' had, you know. How many different things went on for all of those things to take place for you to even be sitting here today? There are trillions of ripples that follow every event. And if we're going to look at one event, the tsunami, a terrible situation where 250,000 people died, we don't know how many ripples that particular event has sent forward into the future. I mean, it's kind of incomprehensible to even think about.
Right, but why would God create a world where those eventualities are required for that ripple effect? Yes, there must have been some positive ripple effects, but the 2/3 of those people who were women, children, and you know, the elderly who couldn't escape the storm, why are they sort of like caught in the crossfire, so to speak?
Well, remember, if life ends in this earth and there's nothing beyond it, that's senseless. But of course, Christians don't believe that life ends at this earth, that it goes into eternity. So I agree that it's senseless for all those people to die if A, there's no eternity, and B, there's no ripple effect. But those two things do exist. There is an eternity and there is a ripple effect. And as Paul says, we don't fix our eyes on what is seen, for what is seen is temporary. We fix our eyes on what is unseen, for what is unseen is eternal. And it's creating for us a greater weight of glory that far outweighs them all. Also, there was a pastor at Notre Dame, the great cathedral in Paris that's now being rebuilt since the fire, but this was 150 years ago. And he, in talking about the ripple effect and talking about the fact that God is outside of time and can see the end from the beginning, he said this: if God were to give me his power for 24 hours, you would see how many changes in this world I would make. But if he gave me his wisdom too, I would leave things as they are. Because he knows how it's all going to turn out. We don't. Now, of course, Christians trace back natural evil all the way back to a choice. First, Satan made a choice, and then Adam and Eve made a choice, and that caused the world to fall. But of course, Jesus entered the bloodstream of humanity as soon as the fall occurred, the first prophecy being Genesis 3:15, in order to redeem those who rebelled against him from the evil that this world has become. So God doesn't sit idly by and goes, oh, look at all this evil stuff that's happening down there. He actually comes into this world and takes evil upon himself. So ultimately, we won't have to pay for our own sins.
Thank you very much.
All right. By the way, it's a good question. People always ask, what are the hardest questions to answer? These are the hardest questions to answer because there is so much speculation, and we don't have enough time to really delve into it. If you want to go further into this, the book Stealing from God has a whole chapter on this very problem.
Great.
All right, thanks, Dean. All right. Yes, sir, what's your name?
Matthew.
Matthew, which means gift from God, ladies and gentlemen. Here he is.
A weird name from an atheist.
Well, maybe God's telling you something. At least mom and dad were trying to tell you something. Go ahead, Matthew.
I have a couple questions. First, if morality is derived from God, then how do you account for different standards of morality among different countries and civilizations and over different periods of time?
Yeah, excellent question. I think C.S. Lewis investigated that very question quite well in his book, The Abolition of Man, where he says that although there are differences among the periphery, he says that all major civilizations have agreed on an essential moral code. That you can't think of a society where, say, it was considered good that you double-crossed all the people kindest to you, or that you ran away from your friends in battle. He said you might as well think of a place where 2 + 2 = 5. You will not find a culture like that. But actually, the argument for morality doesn't require human agreement. If everybody disagreed with morality, that wouldn't mean that morality is somehow subjective. Imagine this. Imagine the Nazis had won World War II, Matthew, and took over the entire world and convinced everybody that murdering Jews was a good thing. Would that make it a good thing?
Of course not.
No, of course not, right? Because there's a standard beyond us. If we have morality wrong, that's not God's fault. That's our fault. See, that would be more sociology rather than morality, how people behave. We're talking about a standard. Even if we disagree with the standard, it still exists.
But then you assert earlier in your presentation about science, how science doesn't say anything, scientists do. It's a similar issue here with morality because, sure, there might be a God who sets specific moral standards, but that ultimately means nothing if that's not how people view society.
Well, no, because people have their free will to say that we're not going to follow the moral code. For example, we were just talking about abortion. You know and I know that when if you and I were right here and saw a live baby being dismembered, we would immediately understand intuitively that's wrong. However, we might suppress the truth about that because we want the convenience of not having a child in our lives. And we can suppress the truth. We all suppress the truth. It's not a matter of our cognition. It's a matter of our resistance to the implications of what the right thing is. We understand dismembering babies is wrong, but we may suppress that so we can have the convenience of getting someone out of our lives we don't want in our lives.
But again, sure, we may have that objective standard of morality set by a God, but that doesn't mean anything here on earth if that's not how we live and that's not how we view morality. That's still what's more relevant to us. For example, you bring up the Nazis repeatedly, how without a God setting morality, then we can't prove that the Nazis were evil. But still, we know Nazis were evil because we all collectively agree that what they did is bad. It's a standard of morality that exists because we agree that it exists.
So what you just said, though, just contradicted what you said earlier, because you said if the Nazis had won and convinced everybody that murdering Jews was right, you admitted that would still be wrong, even if everyone collectively agreed it was right.
Sure, if everyone in that hypothetical world agreed it was right, I would still know it's wrong because I accept the societal standards and I understand.
Wait, Matt, no, the societal standard was murder Jews. That's the
I'm
Nazi
talking about
society.
the societal standards of morality within our life, within the real world.
Well, the Nazis were part of the real world. What do you mean?
Yes, but they didn't win. They didn't convince everyone on the planet that what they did was right. And we know, because everyone agrees that murder is bad, that we know that mass murder is also bad.
Okay,
it's like the philosopher Simone de Beauvoir asserts in her essay, Pyrrhus and Cineas, that ultimately, regardless of whether there is a God or not, there cannot be such thing as standards of morality set by God, because it's ultimately what we agree it to be, and what we agree it to be can change and can be wrong.
Okay, but you're going back at what you said earlier. That's the problem. Because you said earlier that the Nazis would be wrong even if everybody agreed that what they were doing was right.
Yes, and I'm saying that from the perspective of my life in the world where they didn't win.
Okay, hang on. Let me finish the thought, Matthew. That would just be your opinion then.
Yes, ultimately, morality is an opinion. It's
okay,
the
then
societal opinion.
All right, then stop right there. If it's just an opinion, then the Nazis weren't really wrong, correct?
The Nazis were wrong because we all agree they were
No,
wrong. There was also millennia in history when people agreed that slavery was right. Yet, looking back on those times, we don't today agree that slavery was right.
Okay.
We know it was wrong because the societal
let's stay on the
standards of
Nazis for
morality
just a
changed.
second, Matthew. Let's just stay on the Nazis for just a second, okay? So you're saying that the Nazis weren't really wrong because the standard is just human opinion. And so if everybody, all humanity decides murdering Jews is right, you're going to say that's okay, correct?
I would not say that's okay because
well,
I'm
you're
speaking
contradicting your
from the perspective
premise.
of our morality.
You're contradicting the premise then, Matthew. Either the society decides what's right, or there's a standard beyond society that is right, and therefore you can judge societies by that standard. Which is your view?
Yet ultimately, we can't judge societies by that standard because we can't possibly know that standard in this life. Even drawing morality from the Bible, we have fundamental disagreements on the interpretation of different passages, such as
hang on, Matthew. We can't go down a rabbit trail here. You just a few minutes ago had said that everybody agreed murder's wrong, and therefore mass murder's wrong. But now you're saying that people can't agree what's right and wrong. So which is it?
I'm saying we can agree. I'm saying we can't know for certain if there is a God, what that God believes to be right and wrong. We simply cannot know that in our lives.
Why? Why do you say that?
Because ultimately, what morality comes down to is what people agree it to be. For instance, a lot of people draw their morality from the Bible, and we agree on core issues of biblical morality, but we can still debate certain aspects of it. For instance, like when you say that homosexuality is wrong, that it's against God, yet the very passage that derives from is itself up for debate. For instance, we talk about
Matt, we can't go down every one of these. We got to finish anyway. But if I gave you a book, would you read it?
Sure.
Scout's honor?
You give me a book, I will read it.
All right, I'm going to give you a book, and if you don't read it, you're being immoral.
I would be being immoral because I'm betraying your trust.
Right, and that's wrong, universally.
Yes, because we agree that lying is wrong.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, friends, thank you so much. Don't forget, by the way, Matthew, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I got to give you a book. I'll be at the book table. And don't forget, Thursday night, 7 p.m., if you want to learn more about this, a room across the hall. I can't remember the room number now, but it's over there. John, what is it? 2W16. Thanks for the folks watching out there. We'll be at University of Cincinnati in 2 weeks from